Hello everybody, thanks for clicking on the video. This video I wanted to talk about how you prepare for the AAPC and AHIMA certifications. I have 3 AAP certifications and I have 3 AHIMA certifications, and the 2 organizations, you have to prepare for their exams, in my opinion, a little differently. For AAPC, most of their exams are 150 questions. So passing score is 70. So they're kind of straightforward even with their grading. You pretty much have to get at least 105 questions right to pass. And how you get that number is you just multiply 150 times 0.7, and that'll give you the number of questions you have to get right. Because all the questions on the 150 question AAPC exam, they're weighted the same. There's no preference given to certain questions over other questions. Certain sections having more weight than other sections. So it's pretty straightforward. And I found that even their study material is pretty straightforward. The 3 exams that I prepare for, their study guide, I only used the study guide for 2 of them because when I got my CRC, they didn't have a study guide. They just had practice exams. And I used another resource to prepare for the written part of the exam to do some more studying. But for the 2 credentials that I have through them that did have a study guide, if you utilize their study guide and buy all 3 of their practice tests and go through the study guides and really master the material, you should be fine along with the study guide. I found that the actual questions, and even when I took my CRC, even the practice exam questions, they have the exact same level of difficulty. They're worded similarly, so you don't have to, it's not like you walk into the exam and you're like, I don't know what they're talking about. It's very cut and dry. Their material matches the exam perfectly. So, and they will all tell you, like, they don't teach you coding. They assume that you already know how to code. So you're just using the study guide and the practice exams just to reinforce your knowledge and to get used to the sentence structure, the question format, and to also work on building up your speed to answer the questions quickly so you don't run out of time. So AAPC, I don't have any complaints at all about their study material or their practice exams or their test content. Is very straightforward. Now we're going to talk about AHIMA. AHIMA is completely different. You have to do a lot of figuring out to really find out what you have to focus on for the exam. And I'll talk about, I have my CCS, my CCS-P, and my CDIP through AHIMA. And I have found that their exam prep books for all 3 certifications, the worst exam prep book was for the CDIP. It's, in my opinion, complete and utter trash, and they should be ashamed to have their name attached to it. But and the only good thing about the book is like the actual first couple pages to tell you other resources that you have to study or that they suggest, which is actually better than anything else that's in the content of their exam prep book for the CDIP. But for the CCS-P exam prep book and for the CCS exam prep book, there's content on the exam that is not in the exam prep book. And I think that is horrible. I don't know how you have an exam that you charge people for, and you have an exam prep book that you charge people for, and you have content that is not even covered in the exam prep book. I don't understand that. And how I was able to pass the exams, because thank God I passed all of them on the first try. The way I was able to pass the exams is because you have to do some legwork. For AHIMA, what I have found is you have to look at the exam structure, because AHIMA has all of their exams broken down into domains. when you see the percentage next to every domain, they'll have a percentage. It's usually a range, usually like 4% difference, 4 percentage point difference between the range for the question for that particular domain. The domains that have the highest percentage, those are the domains that you want to make sure that you master. You want to make sure that you have them down pat. You are very comfortable with that material. You are very comfortable with everything you have to know about that particular domain, because their exams, because the HIMA exams, they have test questions that aren't counted in both the multiple choice section and in the cases you have to code. So you don't know what question is not being counted and what question is being counted. So you can't figure out a percentage of the questions, how many you have to get right, because I don't know how they calculate their scores. But how I prepare for each of the exams is I look at the exam content and I break it down by domains. The domains that have the largest percentage, I usually pick the top 3, because if you look at pretty much all of them, the top 3 will have mainly at least 75% of the exam. So the way I figured is if it's a weighted exam, which it seems like it is, you want to at least master the domains that they put an emphasis on, because that's going to be the bulk of the exam. So if you do well, just playing a numbers game, if you do well in the domains that have the highest percentage, you should do well on the exam. And that worked for me, because on both my CCS and my CCS-P, there were questions that were in the exam prep. Well, there was questions on the exam that were not even covered in the exam prep book. And for the CCS-P, I didn't even do the practice exam, but I kind of wish that I had, even though thank God I passed it. So when I took my CCS, I did get the practice exam. And even me taking the practice exam, there were still questions on the actual exam that were not covered in the practice exam. So I'm just not understanding how they do their their exam content. But what I have found works for me is you have to look at, you can go to their candidate guide. It's a PDF. You can download it. All of the exams that they administer are in there, and they have them broken down by domains. I just go by the domains, and I pick out the top 3, and I make sure that I master those 3. Because on my because when you get your score report, it'll have whether you passed or failed. It'll also have the percentage that you scored on each domain. Now, on my CCS-P, the top 2 domains were diagnosis coding and procedure coding. So for they were 64% of the exam. Then the other domain, which is domain 1, clinical documentation. So altogether, those 3 came out to be 75% of the exam, somewhere around there. So on the diagnosis coding and procedure coding domains, I got 90% on one, and I got 89% on the other. And then in the domain 1 with clinical documentation, I got 70%. So that's how I was able to pass, because I had done so well on the domains that had the bulk of the questions. And the procedure coding and the diagnosis coding questions are also calculated from the coding cases, because that's all you do. You have to have a primary diagnosis, any additional secondary diagnoses, and the principal procedure. So all that gets calculated. So, and the CDIP, it was the way that it was structured. I think the first 3 domains were the ones that had the most, that had the highest percentage. And before I go to the CDIP, on my CCS exam, there was a domain I got 30% on it, but it didn't matter, because that domain was only 10% of the exam. So so that meant out of maybe, I don't even know how many questions they really calculate. They have it in the book, but it's just kind of crazy how they have it figured out. How they have it calculated. I don't know how they calculate it, but all I know is I focus on the main domains, the highest domain categories, and I focus on them. But so getting back to the CDIP, The CDIP, once it, like, there was the top three domains I focused on, and I got consistently through all of them. I think I got like 70 in the 70 percentages, even though that was by far like I just don't. I mean, I passed the exam because I had been coding for a while and I have done clinical documentation. But if you had to just rely on just the book and the practice exam, I don't know how anybody would pass that. You would have to have practical experience because some of the no, I can't even say some of the questions. The majority of the questions are really kind of like out there. I don't know. I just don't like how they have it set up. And overall, I just don't like how AHIMA does their exam prep books at all. I just think they could be a lot better, and you should tell people what you're going to test them on. And if you want to ask questions, even if you don't want to give specific questions, you should. They say you should know. They should say you should review this. You should be confident. You should know how to do this. I just don't. I don't really. I mean, if I had overall, I've had much better test experiences with AAPC. Like I know, I mean, thankfully, I have no more AHIMA credentials that I want to get, except for I do want to get my AHIMA-Approved, the ICD-10 CM PCS approved provider. So if they have an exam, I already know, the foolishness that they're on. So I'll be able to get through that as well. Because once again, I mean, if you know, that's basically just procedure coding and diagnosis coding. So if you're a strong coder, you can get through. I'm sure they may have some other like teaching or theory questions that you can probably get through, but by and large, I'm not too concerned. But overall, I just want to give people my opinions on the exam prep processes for AAPC versus I have a few more minutes versus AAPC versus AHIMA, because I just really like AAPC overall. I like the only thing I don't like about AAPC is you have to wait like darn near a week for your results. I mean, at least with AHIMA, once they get past the beta period, as soon as you hit submit and you leave your testing station and walk to the proctor, they hand you your results right there. You don't have to wait, so it's kind of automatic. That I really, really, really like, because the wait from the time you take that test on Saturday, so you get your results, and you don't know what day it's going to come. It could be Thursday, it could be Friday, it could be Wednesday. So just the wait is just agonizing. But the wait aside, AAPC all the way. Like their exam prep is on point. Like their study guides, I just can't say it enough. And AHIMA, I think AHIMA, because being in coding and studying for exams, you'll know that they talk about like the 4 cooperating parties that govern ICD-10 CM and coding. So the 4 cooperating parties, 2 of them are government organizations and 2 of them are private organizations. The 2 government organizations are NCHS, which is the National Center for Healthcare Statistics, and CMS, which is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Then the 2 private organizations are the American Hospital Association. They produce the Coding Clinic, and the second private organization is AHIMA. So because AHIMA, and that's really why AHIMA has more of a standing in the coding community, because they actually are part of the cooperating parties, and they actually do decide or help decide coding policy, and when codes are going to be introduced, what codes are going to be introduced, what codes are going to be changed or modified or add. They're involved in the entire coding regulation process. So I think that's why they have a little more status over AAPC in the industry. But in terms of exam prep, they could do a lot better. And I'm sure they're not going to, but they really should, and they could do a lot better. Because people, and at least with AAPC, you get a free retake. Like AHIMA, you have to pay, full price for the exam again. And that was another reason why I just tried to make sure that when I did I don't want to take any exam twice, because it's just agonizing. But I made sure that when I sat for my AHIMA exams, I was as prepared as I could be. And all glory to God, I have passed all of my exams on the first try. But if any credential, whether it's through AAPC or AHIMA, make sure that you use their study material. You cannot mix, because even though it's coding, not the CDIP, but even though it's coding, it's just different how they have them worded, and you want to get used to that type of questioning, because that's going to help you build the speed. Because if you have to change up how you have been processing questions, it's going to slow you down. So all in all, I have to give the best prep to AAPC, but AHIMA is a titan in the industry, and they are going to always be, for the foreseeable future, until they get kicked off the hill from being a cooperating party, they will always be king of the hill. So just be forewarned and forearmed when you do your AHIMA credentials. Get the exam prep book, and definitely do the practice exam. And anything that's on a practice exam that is not on that's not in the exam prep book, make sure that you research it a little more thoroughly. Make sure that you know all about whatever it is that you found differently on your exam, on your practice exam versus exam prep book, because you will see it on your actual exam. So once again, thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, I'm going to include my email address in the description box. Send me a question and we'll get the conversation going. Good luck to everybody who is studying to pass a credential. You can do it. Just make sure that you know the material. Make sure that you have your coding knowledge down. Make sure you know, definitely know your sequencing, know your guidelines, because that's basically almost any coding exam is going to come down to sequencing and coding guidelines. Once you have those things down pat, and your if you're taking your CCS or even your CIC through AAPC, for ICD-10 PCS, you have to know your root operations. If you have that down, you should breeze through the exam. There are some questions you don't even have to look up. If you just know the sequencing guidelines, and if you just know some of the main guidelines, you can pick out the right question. You can pick out like the right answer without even looking up a code. For some questions, not most of them, but for some you can. So that even saves you more time. Anyway, once again, good luck. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll be back soon. Bye.